Ladies and gentlemen, we move directly into a very exciting panel discussion, the art of emotional engagement, enhanced brand storytelling in the digital age. Ladies and gentlemen, please make some noise and help me in welcoming our distinguished panel on stage. He is Principal, Boston Consulting Group. Please welcome on stage our moderator, Siddeshwar Prabakaran. Come on, can we have some noise? Can we have a round of applause for Siddeshwar Prabakaran? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's election time. I know election fever is coming up, and there's always a maramari for chairs and seats. But we've seated everybody, and it's over to our moderator, Mr. Siddeshwar Prabakaran, and the panel. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much to all the panelists for sparing some time out for us. I just wanted to start off with a quote on this topic. And I was looking at what are different people talking about this story, and this one struck with me. This is from Jeff Bezos. He says, "Your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room," right? Which tells me that it's about three things. One, how are you able to cut through the clutter? How are you being differentiated in, sort of the sameness that is present across? How are you able to build a connect when people think about you more as not just an entity that is making money, but do you stand for something more than that? And how do you build a community which can talk about you even when you don't talk about yourself, right? So I think these are three things that are very consistent whenever we have looked at people talking about storytelling, emotional engagement, and we'll obviously discuss about how it's changing, but at least these are some of the consistent tenets. And a few other things, right, which just wanted to call out in the digital age. And we have a lot of storytellers. It's not about brands. We have individual storytellers. There are about 200 billion Instagram reels that are sort of viewed on a daily basis. There are about 50 billion YouTube shorts views that happen on a daily basis. So the potential for democratization of information storytelling is huge today. So in this context, right, I just wanted to set these two things up and then open it up for a discussion. So, and it's a complex topic, so we might want to just break it down into a couple of segments. So one of the things that I was thinking about is to talk about the storytelling aspect and how does it appeal to the consumer. And the second one, how is it changing in the context of the digital age that we operate in today? I think these are two things that we can focus on. Maybe something, any one of you can jump in actually, and then we can have a free-flowing conversation. When does the story actually start? Because we talk about a solution, we talk about an idea that is actually fulfilling a basic gap in the market or something which is differentiated, right? And it's a lot of times it's functional. And we talked about a few examples where people have actually done well for themselves when they fulfilled a functional need. So is it that a story actually starts at that point of time, or is it later, after the brand has actually established its connection with the functional need, that a story actually develops? So open to the panel. Anybody can actually jump in.
I think, first of all, thanks to whoever coined such a complex issue. I don't know if it'll take an hour or a day to run through all the aspects of that
No,
issue.
this is after 2 hours of actually discussing on it.
That's true. In my opinion, the story starts from the time that the need is already identified, because that's where the story is. The story can be of various kinds. What kind of a story do you want to tell? The story could be a story told in a competitive environment. It could be a story told about the need that is being fulfilled, but it's always a story. At the end of the day, so the genesis of the story is when the need was being fulfilled. And then it carries forward into what was the story, how well was it told, what impact did it have on people, and how did they respond to that story. So, yeah, I mean, we are just using the term story, but I think it's the genesis of a need that gets translated to an action.
Got it. Any other take on it before?
Hi everyone. No, I think the story comes from customer story. And how do we, first of all, understand what story does the customer wants to build? And within that, how do you integrate your own story? Or what could be the aspirational story that the customer wants to build? So that's something that we'll have to understand as a brand, as a retailer, as a manufacturer. Because in every duration or every times, there is something that the customer is looking forward to. Like today, in today's age, if we look for the Gen Z population, I think authenticity is one story which is selling very well in the entire globe. And that's the story. If you are able to connect, and if your value systems are aligned with that story, and if your culture in the organization is aligned to that story, your belief system is integrated with that story, you can actually create that story which will gel with your consumer, and that is where the entire story gets built up, and that entire story becomes a story which can be spoken about, chatted about, and becomes a word of mouth. And that is how your brand also get infatuated or inflected. So that's how we will make this story contagious. And that is what is important, I think.
So can I just add something to that? I just want to pick up on the value system that Mr. Agarwal talked about, right? And again, I represent a technology company, so it's a little different from the rest of the panelists who are all B2C brands, etc., whereas we are a B2B company. But I do believe that one of the success factors, in our case, is the fact that we consistently stick to our values, right? And these are values that we as employees are encouraged to live, on a daily basis. This is not just something that is written on a plaque somewhere and forgotten about it for the rest of the year, but it is something that, the company actively encourages. And if I were to take an example of one of the values called customer success, we were one of the pioneers in the SaaS industry, the software as a service industry, when it started way back in 1999. The whole function of customer success is very critical to the success of the company itself, because on the cloud it's very easy to migrate to other competitors, etc., right? You just have to turn it off and go to another competitor. Therefore success of that customer was very, very critical. And if you look at the industry, a lot of them have customer success function now, but that was something that was again pioneered by us, is what I like to believe. And being consistent with that and living your values on a daily basis, I think that builds the story on its own, right? And how you are able to connect, with your consumer base using those values is very critical.
So are you referring to, let's say, consistency of values in the communication of the story? Because, the reason I'm saying this is, it's also many Indias. Is the story going to be consistent when you think about a geographical spread for a particular retailer, brand, etc.? Or is it important that we need a single story that resonates with as many consumers as possible?
Probably I'll throw light on that, Siddesh. What happens is, in India, the product can be generic, but the storytelling can be regional. because we are so diverse, the kind of number of states that we function in, and the kind of we were just talking back end that we so many brand faces that have been part of a lot of brands that we are sitting over here, and how they have helped the brands to grow and create a story in that particular state or city. So I think it matters a lot. So when you're talking about your product is mostly generic, but when your storytelling becomes regional, it really impacts. For an example, with us at Neeru's, what we probably for a lot of years we had a national face as a brand ambassador to open stores nationally. But just a couple of months back, we knew that we are going to open at least 7 to 8 stores deeper into a place of Andhra. So we opened 4 stores in places like Rajamundry, Kakinada, Nellore, and all of that. And then we realized if we are going to tell our story our way, it may not work out. We need something which is more regional. So then is when we thought of getting a face which is more popular in that region. So we had somebody called Sri Leela, who's the actress from the Telugu film industry. And the day we took her over as a brand face, and we went to the cities like that, and we had the store openings, I remember seeing sight of more than 5,000, 10,000 people in that town gathering around the store and actually talking about the launch of the store. So that becomes like your story when you're entering that town. You have related so well with them, connected so deeply with them, that I would have spent much more throughout the year, rather that one launch has done the job for us. So regional story probably is a different aspect.
Sure.
May I?
Yeah, sure.
So, I think the question you have to ask your business is, are you solving a problem for somebody or not? If you're solving a problem, you have a story to tell. Otherwise, you have no story to tell.
So, to add to that, in terms of what is at the core and what is it that changes? What is it that does not change and what is it that does change? I think the values of the brand, if you're talking of a brand story, the values of the brand can't change, because what then is your customer? Who then is your customer? The values of that brand story can't change. But how you the way you say the story, to who you tell the story, when you tell the story, all of that can change. The language that you use, for example, depending on where you are at, all of that can change. But what is at the core of the brand, which is the values that the brand stands for, if you change that, then it's a new story. It's not the same brand that you're talking about. It's a new brand that you're talking about. So some things remain constant. But I think in this changing world, many other things around that change in terms of how, if you look at, how our brand stories used to be told in the past, a lot of that was in the offline media. We do very little of it in the offline media today. A lot of that story is now told in the digital world, because that's where your consumers are. And that's where you have the highest propensity to reach out to your consumers. So the how has changed, but the core remains the same.
So basically, consistency of the values that the brand delivers, that message needs to be consistent. The storytelling needs to be adapted locally. And the mediums are obviously changing, which is giving a whole different set of opportunities, right? Any other examples that we can talk, Sanjay? I mean, we were discussing about what you were doing in Gujarat, right, for Spykar. So, anything to this effect?
So I feel a step back, and I would want to say a few things about the storytelling bit. I feel from the time brands have been there, storytelling has been there. We hear a lot of it now, probably because the mediums have changed and the opportunities that you have, or rather the compulsions that you have to sell and to tell many stories is a lot more. But otherwise, from the time, I think, since the time immemorial, brands have been sold basis storytelling. So it's just a lot of hue and cry now on storytelling, primarily because we have the Insta times, and every day 2 or 3 posts needs to go out, and hence the storytelling becomes all the more critical and more urgent. Having said that, I feel for every brand, and my co-panelists have also discussed here, that it depends on where and whom you're talking and at what point of time in your journey. And so at Spykar, for a while now, we have been segmenting our audiences regionally. Early days, probably another 3-4 years back, we used to look at it as one homogeneous piece. But now we started looking at it from a market perspective. We are trying to segmentize it. Just as a case, as an example, For us, Gujarat happens to be a very large market and very important market. And so we kind of moved a little away from how we used to speak about festivals. And there are two festivals that come to my mind where we had created some activity around it. One was the Raksha Bandhan, and Raksha Bandhan is just one day, and it just passes off with a happy Raksha Bandhan kind of a post. But at Spykar, what we did was we kind of created a Rakhi, which was unique in its own ways. We created a Rakhi which was made of beads, and the beads were actually Morse codes. And the Morse code actually read out, "I love you, bhaiya." And we packed it into a small package where there was a perfume and also a gift voucher for the sister. So that one packet had one Rakhi, something for the brother, which is normally not the case in Raksha Bandhan, and something for the sister as well. And for us, women wear was one category that we were venturing into. And so we were speaking to the sister and giving her a gift voucher. Now, this was mainly done in Gujarat, because Gujarat and Uttar Pradesh and rest of Maharashtra. So festivals which are kind of celebrated a lot more with a little bit of emotional connect over there. Our stories also ran where brother and sister recounted their days of fun and masti. And so that kind of created a huge amount of traction for the brand. At no point of time we really spoke about Spykar. It was just about some emotional tug that we wanted to pull and give a nudge. Similarly, in Navratri, what we did this time was again kind of spoke to a much more smaller audience, which is again Rajasthan, Gujarat and Maharashtra, where we all know that 9 days of Navratri means special, and 9 days have a special meaning with respect to the colors that you sport and to which goddess that you pray to. And I think a lot of youngsters today don't know that. And so how do we get the essence of Navratri to a younger audience and in the space that they would love to consume the story? So we created 9 stories where a good Garba player created 9 different steps of Garbas, and they were dressed in that one particular color for that day. And the significance of that day and the goddess was brought across in that 10 seconds of a story. So I feel that this personalization, this regional, how do you put the regional sentiments into the front and speak about it, and then through that communicate what the brand stands for your consumer and your audience is very critical. So these are probably a few examples which come to my mind.
Sure. Just, topping it up, right? Because we are talking about storytelling as a basic need to sort of connect with the audience emotionally. But at the same time, hitting the mark on emotional needs is also a lot tougher versus, let's say, hitting the mark on, let's say, technical or functional needs, right? So what do brands need to do to avoid, let's say, a hit and a miss? What are the risks, and how do you sort of integrate it into a marketing campaign which is effective, right? Because at the very outset, a lot of great ideas, we think we know the customer, we think, these kind of things will work, but sometimes it doesn't, right? So what are the basic necessities that need to be in place? Sure, please.
Sure. So in this topic, there are 3 things you have to do to answer your question, right? If you want to succeed in really hitting the mark: content, intent and method, right? These 3 things. In recent memory, one can recall one of the most fascinating ways of striking back. We have a neighboring island country where people used to go on a holiday, right? And they did something which is really quite unexpected. We don't know the reason why they did it. But somebody from Delhi went to Lakshadweep, and that person put a chair and walked 5 times up and down the beach, never said anything, never made a comment. Island the Dubia, right? So it is about your content, your intent and your method. So any one of these things is missing, you will never do a good job. Whether it's emotional or non-emotional, it doesn't matter. Emotion depends upon what the content is. We are emotional about the army, about India, about the parents, about our children, and the cricket match that you win or lose. if you see all the things that we are most deeply emotional about, we neither buy them nor do we sell them. So those are the things which are where there's no transaction is where you can be most emotional, because your connection with that brand is ultimate. All brands actually try to get to that position. So your content, your intent, and your method has got to be well aligned. Any one of these, one thing missing in these three, you won't hit the mark.
Got it. And maybe it's a good segue to talk about these three. So when you talk about content, right, are there certain stories that are resonating more with the Indian audience right now? Is there a change? Is there a shift that we have seen in the last 5-10 years? Happy.
I think we briefly spoke about this. I think there are some universal values that everybody cherishes, and it really, age is no bar and time is no bar. If you're talking in terms of the content that we spoke about, Radha spoke about a little while earlier, which is things to do with your family, things to do with parents, children, illness, good health. All of these things are universal in nature. I don't think that is ever going to go away. But there are new value systems that we've created that have come to being. For example, sustainability is not something I had heard of either as a word or as a concept when I grew up in life, because there was so little of anything available in the India that I grew up with that sustainability was not even a word that was sustainable at that point of time. So, but it's a value system that is very, very important today. Then value systems have changed in terms of gender mix that is there. Value systems have changed in terms of, different kinds of orientation that people have. All of these have become extremely important for our audiences today, depending on which target audience you're aimed at. So to that extent, some universal values will continue to stand the test of time, but there are a whole bunch of new values that people will buy into. And I think if you're a brand that needs to appeal to that target audience, then you have to have changed or added on those values to the values that you probably started off with. For example, I look after Fossil, and Fossil started off in 1984 in the US based on accessorizing the risk. The idea was, let's accessorize everybody. And there were two elements that was the DNA, the core to the DNA of the brand. One was a continuum between modern and vintage. That's what the brand was about. It was a blend between modern and vintage. Now, well, as a universal concept, that is true anywhere. All of us have great memories of something that relates to vintage. Vintage, roughly, I'd put at about 30 years from before. Everybody has a nice thought and a memory that carries back, when I was a kid or when my parents told me, something that leads back in time. So that value that we are talking about, which is vintage and modern as a theme, is universal in nature. How it's expressed today is very different from how it's expressed, it was expressed in 1984. For example, today when you look at the memorabilia, I think a lot of people in this room wouldn't even have seen the kind of stuff that we did. For example, we had little planes that were, propeller-driven planes. I think very few of us have seen those planes today. But that was significant at that point of time. So the how of the storytelling, the what of the storytelling has changed, but that part has remained constant. Got it.
Yeah, I just want to add something here, Siddeshwar, quickly. I agree with Johnson. I think there are some values which stand the test of time. They continue to remain, prominent, at least from our perspective. Trust has been our number one value, for example. And guess what? Trust is more important than ever before in this, age of data and AI. Everybody's worried about what's going to happen to their data. Is it going to be misused, etc., right? So, and, we continue to put in a lot of effort to ensure that the data that you are giving us and which is stored on our platform deserves the highest level of, security, privacy controls, etc., so that you can trust us on that data, right? But the other thing that got added recently is sustainability, as he said. But again, I think, like I was saying earlier, you have to put in the efforts to visibly, tell the community that you're serving or the society that you live in that this is a value that really matters to all of us, right? And one example of that is, when we conduct these, large conferences, they've really eliminated, plastic, almost, 99%, I would say, right? Even the badges, like, for example, it's nice to see this is made of paper and not a plastic. But these lanyards, I'm not sure how we're going to, recycle them. But there are lots of these opportunities. Instead of having plastic water bottles, you could have water filling stations, and maybe give them a aluminum bottle, something that you can refill, right? So there are lots of ways to communicate that, and I think that's also part of the storytelling, I believe, right? Which adds to who you are as a company and what you are as a brand and what you represent. My point here is that it can be a part of your values, but you can tell a lot of different stories, but those stories have to be consistent and something that people can actually experience for themselves, right? Not something that you put in an ad or something like that.
Got it.
I'll probably add on to that. I think from any era that you talk about, or even today, it's all about talking to your customer in some way or the other. Like probably in the 80s, 90s, people had different ways. There were a lot of BTL activities, a lot of advertising, which was different kind, where even a hoarding or even a paper ad made a lot of difference to the consumers and their mindset while going out to shop. But today, I think the story, more than brand story, it's become the Insta story. So what you're talking pre and post, probably something which was before the digital kind of barged in, and what we used to do raw advertising earlier is changed now. But again, it all zeroes down to how you talk to your customer. Every brand has a story, like how he said that the core has to be same. Every brand has a story. You have to probably choose the right medium today. Like back then, probably what we used to do when I spoke about some Indian diaspora which used to come and shop with us, how we call them as NRIs. So I remember having statements in hoardings or paper ads that we used to write, Neeru's the most preferred brand of the NRIs. So, that made a difference. And there were a lot of NRI customers used to come and they used to read that in magazines or papers or hoardings. And I remember they used to come with 2 suitcases, dropping one at the store and one at their home and saying, this is an empty one, I want to fill it up and go back to America. And that's how the advertising worked with them. And they actually used to do it. And they used to say, we will take it a couple of hours before the flight actually departs. Versus today, the same customer sitting in California, if we as a brand want them to buy as an NRI, today the medium is different. I think today it's all about how we are talking to them probably on Instagram. Today, if I have the right shoot, if I have the right content going digitally, back and forth, because today the attention span is so less. Like 15-20 minutes ago, probably what I saw on my Facebook or Instagram or any digital ad, I may not remember that even 20 minutes later. But it's how you leave the mark in that 10-20 seconds window that you get with the customer. It's like probably storytelling in 20 seconds is the art today digitally. So for that, again, you have to be attached to your brand value, where a lot of probably ethnic wear is something which is so emotionally attached anyway. You're talking about purchasing it for an occasion. You're talking about purchasing it for a Diwali, for a Dasera, or for a wedding, or for someone else's wedding. So there's already so much emotion to it. You won't believe people in our stores when they walk in. There are times when there are 8 people coming to buy one lehenga for a lady. So that much emotional value is what a brand holds and what people have trust in the brand. So that in itself is a storytelling. That why 8 people are coming to buy one lehenga, it's a story to tell later that, we had gone to so-and-so store and we enjoyed the moment of buying that particular lehenga for the wedding of your mother, of your wife, or however it is placed. So I think that digital window that you get for 10 seconds, how you can utilize today. So pre and post digital is a very unique understanding. We have brands which are from 1980s. We ourselves are here since 4 decades. So we understand the silent shift that is happening. So functionally, how you relate to the brand and the kind of consumers may change. But orally, when your story is right and you're still talking about the same emotions, because families are same, your customer base is same. Once a teenager, today a grandmother may be still a part of your brand. But how do you depict that? How do you tell that story to her that, why don't you tell your grandchildren to opt ethnic wear at a particular occasion? So she becomes your silent influencer. So influencer again is a big topic now. So when you talk about digital, so it's on and on and on. Probably we were talking about one of the national brands and how digital influencing kind of helped it scale up in terms of telling his story, his or her story. So I think influencing has become a very big part. Somebody walks in today, I see he's wearing a nice suit, but he's wearing probably Skechers. So I'm like, it's amazing. So he has influenced me. Why am I wearing a formal shoe? Skechers with a suit can be an option. I've seen ladies who have gone to their wedding, their own wedding. They're wearing a lehenga, they're wearing sports shoes under. They say, I have to survive 24 hours in this garment from my function to my end of all the festivities. So why not wear a sports shoe within? So she has influenced probably the 100 other people in the wedding. So now they are all going to go for two things: buy the right lehenga and buy the right sports shoe. So that is the silent influence.
Got it. So, I mean, we'll come to the influencing angle in a bit, but just wanted to touch upon, is there a nuance across different categories? Right, so we spoke about lifestyle brands. We spoke about some of the premium brands. We spoke about even B2B for that matter. Right? Are there categories which are sitting at different ends of the spectrum in terms of how much of a functional aspect needs to be in the story versus an emotional aspect? I'm just inviting if there is anything to that extent. Do we need to look at maybe grocery, for example? Or if as a brand we stand for value, how much of a functional versus emotional does it actually merit in the conversation?
See, ultimately it's the experience that the customer carries, and the experience is at the store when they are buying, the product that they have bought, and the utilization of the products. So it involves all the three, and then definitely there are different kind of customers, and we need to understand the customer type. There could be a Gen Z customer who has a different emotional connect that you are trying to connect. There could be a young woman, a young smart woman who has a tight budget to handle her family, to handle her house. How do you make her a smart lady, a smart woman who is the smartest one amongst her neighbor or amongst her friend, where her kid is looking good, her home is looking good, and she's able to manage it all within the desired budget? And how do you create that kind of experience and that kind of functional capability where you can fulfill her need and make her emotionally connected with the experience at the store, where your people who are treating them, the staff who are talking to them, the kind of connection that you build, emotional connect that you build while they are shopping, and that is the most important. It is whether it is the need-based product or it is a style-based product, there is a story that you can sell, and that is what you pitch. How do you make her look stylish? How do you make her look different? It's the story that you need to build. This is where you touch the emotion. वो तभी जब भी वो वापस आती है पूछती है वो लड़का या लड़की कहाँ है, the name, she'll record those names and she'll come and ask for that name. And that is the connection that every brand has to build. And that comes right from the experience that the customer get at all the interactions that the brand has with the customer, whether it is in the store or away from the store or through advertisements. And that is where, that is the powerful storytelling is what I say, which is of word of mouth, which is where the customer goes out and becomes your influencer. And that is an authentic influencer. And that is the most powerful story that you can build. Other stories में आपको रोज पैसा डालना पड़ेगा, रोज स्टोरी क्रिएट करनी पड़ेगी. जब ये स्टोरी क्रिएट कर देंगे तो कोई पैसा नहीं डालना पड़ेगा, अपने आप वायरल हो जाएगा और कस्टमर अपने आप आने लग जाएंगे.
Right. And you touched about it, like many mediums, right? You have multiple touch points with customers. How do you actually project a convincing story which is coherent across the journey is also very important, right? And I think we can call that as the medium. So in the current world that we live in, how are the mediums changing? Because obviously people are getting more digitally influenced to purchase something. When we think about a purchase journey, it's no longer somebody walks into a store and is aware of the product. They are well aware of the product before, they've done their research. There is a good chance that they are part of different WhatsApp groups, different Telegram groups, where things have been influenced already. So
I'll just cut you short on this. Just before this session, we were speaking with Nagesh. And Nagesh was telling me a small example that my granddaughter, who's 3.5 years old, is guiding her mother what to wear. When she went to the mall, she saw something and came back home and said, I want that sandal. And that is a real new influencer which is getting created in the house. And that's so powerful. So ultimately, the product is a very, very powerful thing that will drive your story. And that is also very important. So, sorry.
Yeah. No, for sure. Product is definitely important. But and I was actually coming to how do you integrate all of it together? How do you know that there are these mediums which are digital, customers are coming there, then customers are probably walking into the store. How do we sort of integrate together? Just wanted to touch upon it. I mean, if you
Is that
want
okay
to.
if I take that one?
Yeah.
Because I think it's quite related to what we do. So out of all the esteemed panelists here, we are a bit different because we are also a technology company. And I think what most of the, I would say the retail industry, with respect to customer experience and emotional connect and everything, there has to be a trigger, right? And that trigger can be anything. It can be a barcode, it can be a QR code, or it can be a RFID tag. And that is what is going to create a physical to a digital identity, which will actually enable all these brands to connect with their end users. And everybody today with, being on the phone almost 24 hours, there's nothing better than the phone to connect to the end user, right? So we, I would say globally, because we are coming more from a global perspective. In retail space, we have about 70% of the track and trace and brand engagement market in the world, right? All the big brands from Zara to Louis Vuitton to Uniqlo use our solutions to connect with their end users. And one of the biggest things that we see is that the enabling trigger with NFC is one of the most effective ways of communicating with the end user, right? And we have seen, for example, we did a joint partnership with NXP, where we actually put NFC tags on Adidas running shoes, right? And whenever somebody buys that limited edition shoe, there's an app which goes with it. And when he actually scans the shoe, if he's, let's say, he's bought the shoes in London and he's going to New York, the app will suggest if there are any running events or marathons, and if there are any parks where you can run and have your own workout session, and also a community and the timings and stuff like that. So the brand recall for Adidas was huge in that experiment, right? And there was a certain percentage of, I would say, market share that Adidas was able to gain over another multinational brand. So I think the emotional connect, the visibility with the end user, and the brand recall are the most important aspects for a brand to survive. So there are certain things where a brand would not be in a position to change their tagline or their, vision, right? Not many people, like you would have seen Nike being that same vision for almost 30, 40 years now. It's almost impossible to change the vision because of that market. But I think in India, what we are seeing is that the brands are being created by people from 18 to 24 age group. Okay? And there's a specific brand in India which is growing at a tremendous rate and which is going to become one of the biggest retail chains in fast fashion. And one of the enablers for that is to get the customer vibes what fashion they're wearing, what is the colors that, that they prefer and things like that, through technology and through brand connect. And we're going to see this as a major differentiator. And also, for example, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of Amazon Scan and Go. So that was something that we did with Amazon in the US. So people are moving to a phase where we are giving the end user or the customer less time to think about whether they want to buy this or not. So which actually increases your sales. So if you actually see the sales data of an Amazon scan and go store, it's almost 90% sales, right? And that's because you have so much little time to decide whether you want to buy this product or not, and leave it off the shelf because everything is moving so quickly. And you also don't realize that you have actually paid for it because it's all automatic. I mean, you do get your bill at the end of the month, but it's made it so seamless that even the customer is not aware that he's actually spending. And that is the way I think retail is going to move in the next 5 to 10 years in India, for sure. Because India is at a place where I think we can skip some of the drawbacks of, let's say, the European market and the US market and go direct for what's being done in those spaces, right? So that was my point of view of that.
Sure.
I want to step back to the question that you raised, which is, what's changed? And I think if you were to look at over the last few decades, products have changed, of course, but those have evolved over time. If you want to look at something that has changed in a completely quantum manner, and I think that would be communication. So, not so long ago, communication used to be one source writing a message, driving a message to a large number. So one to many. You would look at an authenticated source that created content, so to speak, and shared that content with a large number of people. That source, when the communication happened in a one-way process. So by and large, the communication went one way. There wasn't a response expected on that communication. But the digital world is completely different. What it's done is it's changed the entire paradigm of communication from this one to many to everybody becoming a source and a content creator. Today, every single one of us in some form or the other is a content creator. It's not that we weren't creators earlier, but there was nobody willing or able or capable of listening to us because our entire circuit and circle that we would communicate with was the immediate circle we have. Today, the world's our stage. So what you've really done is you've taken every single individual now has the ability to actually communicate to the world at large. So effectively, we are all influencers in a manner of speaking. But I think that's the single largest driver of a lot of what we are seeing today from a communications perspective.
And if you look at it, and this democratization of information, ability to reach people, has it made it easier for brands to tell a story, or has it actually made it more difficult to cut through all of the clutter?
Just as a quick follow-up, and I'm sure that everybody on this podium has a view on this one. On an average, if I read the stats right, most Indians, on an average, India spends about 3 hours and 35 minutes on social media per day. Per day. I'm surprised that people work beyond that and they have the rest of their life to live beyond that. But at 3 hours, 35 minutes is an amazingly long period of time. So what do you think is happening in 3 hours and 35 minutes? It's an insane amount of information that is coming your way. So is it easy now to communicate? Theoretically easy because you have the whole world as your stage. Earlier, if you wanted to get to, let's say, 10% of the population of India, you had to drive that through so many different processes to get there. Today, if you want to get to 10%, well, you might get to much more than that if your message goes viral. So in a way, it's the whole world available to you. But is it complex? It definitely is complex because at the end of the day, attention spans, and we spoke about that, I think, on the podium earlier. Attention spans are so minute that if you don't have a story powerful enough to connect with the audience in that few microseconds that you get, 3 to 4 seconds that you get to connect with the person, there is no story. That person's not heard your story, is not interested in your story, doesn't know who you are. So, is it difficult? It certainly is. But the very fact that you've got so many brands that have evolved and come up in a short period of time only tells us that it's possible. Now, how good we do that, how well we are able to address that, I think is the capacity and capability and our understanding of the medium that we are using to drive that message. But it's really an interesting situation to be in.
Any other reactions on this question?
Probably one, maybe in or out of context, but just to make it a mention because it's been doing the rounds for probably last 1 year. A lot of brands have gone into mechanical advertising. So when I say mechanical advertising, probably put some examples. It's like Sabyasachi showing his warehouse and where the karigar is sitting and stitching the lehenga. Probably a Starbucks in Milan where they have come up with an experience Starbucks where it's like a roastery, showing how the beans are being brewed and how the coffee is very different and authentic. Probably maybe a Range Rover showing that, you know, how mechanically one autobiography Range Rover is made over a period of time. Probably a Piaget watch showing how the dial is within and, you know, actually see through the mechanical advertising part of it. So I think there is a little paradigm shift that has happened across categories where people are starting to know more about your product. So probably earlier it was different. So probably if you ask me as a retailer for an ethnic store, we never even used to have more than 2 mirrors because we used to say जितना दिखेगा lady उतना fault निकालेगी कि ये dress या साड़ी में क्या खराब है. आज उल्टा है. आज वही लेडी को पता करना है कि आपने इसमें क्या कपड़ा यूज़ किया है, कौन सा धागा यूज़ किया है, कहाँ बना है, ये किधर की वीविंग है. More knowledge. Probably in one of our stores, we actually had to install a live handloom machine where a guy, a weaver, is actually making the sari live. So it's all about mechanical. So somehow there is this is again content, this is again storytelling. And trust me, probably this is one of the best way of storytelling. If you ask me what, as a retailer, as a brand, if you are trying to absorb what is happening right in the world in terms of marketing your content, I think this part is very new, is very fresh. People don't know what is behind the scenes. Probably after every movie today, you see a BTS. So, you know, people want to know that what was Ranbir Kapoor doing in a movie in Animal in BTS in that movie, rather than actually doing that action scene. Did he actually lift that gun and he was firing it off? So all this has become a very core content of a brand story, that mechanical advertising has become very popular and it is here to stay. And it is very good for brands to adapt because there's no harm. Earlier there was, but today I feel it's the way to carve out the niche and explain your brand, your product better, because end of the day, product is product. How much ever we all are sitting here for only one end goal, which is sale. All we want is sale. जैसे भी आए, कोई भी मीडियम से आए, वो एडवर्टाइजिंग होर्डिंग से आए या आपका इंस्टाग्राम से आए, इन्फ्लुएंसर से आए, all we want is, we want our top lines to be increasing, we want the sale to be increasing. That's how a brand survival is there. But the mediums, like everybody is saying, is changing. But one fascinating medium is mechanical advertising. As per me, personal choice, I don't know about others.
Sure.
No, I think it's, in terms of the method, life's pretty desperate, right? You don't know what to do next. Very recently, an influencer or a to-be influencer, the news was that she had actually died. So there was so much of buzz around that for 7 days, and finally she appeared and they connected it with the brand. I mean, I've heard this thing about, you know, dying for your work, but, you know, this is really the wrong sort of dying. But I think the method is hugely challenged today. You may have a really good product, but you can't communicate it well enough and at a reasonable cost. And I think we are going to have the next biggest job opportunity is for psychiatrists, which is really digital psychiatry, right? Where the amount of time, some of my very beloved people in the family, the amount of time that they spend on the WhatsApp University or Instagram or stuff like that, useless, not even 1% is, and then they're so intelligent after watching all that stuff. You know, it's really a matter of worry.
So let me connect the
So,
medium.
so I'll just finish. So I think we need to, so in terms of the content and the intent may be right, but the methodology is where everything is failing. Good brands, good ideas, great opportunities, solving a problem. Nobody knows you. You already spent $100 million of a Japanese investor. Khatam ho gaya. So it just comes back to bite you. So I'm not sure where this is going, but life's not so simple.
I think it's probably one of the reasons, or rather the causes of the fact that this whole medium is so cluttered, that people are so desperate to catch your attention in any which way. And I think that's not the right way for sure. But that's probably the most low-cost way that she could have probably thought of getting attention towards her.
But by her own admission,
Yeah.
she was saying to remain dead for 7 days was a huge problem because she has to hide. How do you hide and not meet anybody
She
for
managed
7
it
days?
well, I guess.
She had a serious problem. She had to go for psychiatric treatment after that.
But I think finally it all boils down to you having great content, and that's probably the way probably you'll break the clutter up, because otherwise everybody is wanting to be on the platform to be seen. So unless until you really think hard, and one of the things that is working very well, and I also agree, is a mechanical marketing, where people are very curious to know what goes behind bringing a good product or a good service. And so these are probably more ways of talking to the customers and creating content. And I'm sure there'll be a lot more which will emerge along the way, because the need is so dramatically solid and so much need is there to create content that there is an end to this creativity also, I feel.
I think you should ask the audience, which is in the last 3 years, the brand which is on top of everybody's mind and solves a problem. I can't think of any. All the brands we are wearing and doing is more than 10, 15 years old.
And so, I mean, I was just about to come to that. If you look at the medium And if I were to connect the point on many to many sort of information dissemination, right? How does a brand control narratives? Because, we were talking about consistency of messaging. We were talking about consistency of the values getting delivered and, very sharply curated to the region in which they operate, right? If we have to do this, but there is also a lot of different content creators for a brand, it's going to be that much more difficult to control a narrative.
I think it's pretty challenging. There's no question about the fact that you can't control the narrative in the same way that you could when it was in the old days where you had a one-to-many kind of communication, where you had 100% control of the narrative. But don't forget that, one of the words we used earlier on the podium was the need to be authentic. And I think to some extent, the fact that there is an expression of the brand in a manner that sounds more authentic probably also adds value to the brand, even if it's not exactly scripted the way it needs to be, because it's an authentic experience. So I think the balance is a very, very careful balance, and it's a very delicate balance, and it could fail at any point of time because you'd have somebody who's enthusiastic and does something completely out of line with what the brand stands for. But really speaking, is it all within your control to the extent that you've got influencers that you've connected with and you've employed doing that, and you have control over the output? Then there is some control available. But what happens if somebody decides to express their own perspective because they love the brand? You can't stop that. But that's exactly why I said, the entire process of communication has become so democratic and many to many that you're going to hear authentic voices speaking spelling out their story, speaking their story, but it may not be exactly the story that you crafted out. So that's going to be part of the experience that you have to live with, and it could go out of sync at any point of time.
No, but I would say the word authentic has to be lived in. And if everyone lives and the value system across the organization is similar and the belief is there and belief is very well aligned with their authenticity, I don't think it has to be created. It comes out. And what comes out cannot be differentiated. Most of the time it will come out as uniform. And that is what, if your fundamental layers of authenticity or value systems are ingrained in your organization, are ingrained across the stores in whatever geographies that you have, those fundamentals are key to things, but there will always be a regionalization. There will always be a personalization messaging that you will want to do. There will be always different personas that you are targeting, and each persona would be wanting to get communicated in a differentiated way, but still the underlying value system has to be constant to deliver the similar belief, and that is very, very important. That's what I think will matter the most.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point, but on a counterpoint, I just want to bring up let's take your favorite restaurant. Which restaurant would you guys believe in? The one that has got 1,000 ratings, all 5-star. No 4-star, no 3-star, no 2-star, no 1-star. All 1,000 was 5-star. Or would you believe in a restaurant that had, 90% 5 stars and a few 4 stars and a couple of 1 stars? But the point is, even the guy who gave 1 star can write a negative message, which is out of line with what the brand stands for, maybe a one-off experience. But to my mind, the second example that I gave is probably more authentic, because it says, somebody did have a bad experience. There's not a single restaurant that I've gone to or a hotel that I've gone to that didn't have some customers. But if a preponderance of the customers say it's a bad experience, then obviously I'm going to think twice about going to that restaurant. But if every single customer said it's a fantastic experience, that number was not 2 or 3 but 5,000, I'd really wonder, where did that number come from? Yeah, so I think the element of authenticity, all of us are human beings, all of us know what sounds authentic, what doesn't. Maybe there is a magical restaurant that all 1,000 people did give a 5-star rating to. I'd love to go there. That'll be an experience by itself, but that's generally not the truth.
That's the difference between the created message and an actual message.
So I just want to add one point to this. There is this notion of community, right? And I think a lot of brands around the world, including India, they have a followers, right? A set of followers or a community of followers who are brand advocates, champions, evangelists, etc. And I think that's very important for for brand building, for storytelling, because that takes a life of its own, right? And how you orchestrate that is totally dependent on the brand itself. But that is something that, in a B2B world, we don't see a lot of, but at least, with my company or employer, we've done a phenomenal job. And, there is what we call as a trailblazer community, right? So the trailblazer community, the commonality, of course, is their interest in the Salesforce, technology and the platform. But they, ultimately, adhere to the belief system that Salesforce itself, believes in, right? And they run a lot of events which are completely, not sponsored or related to the Salesforce company itself. But, it has taken a life of its own, and we have a gamified, sort of a learning platform called Trailhead. And there are 8-year-old kids in India who go and, complete learning modules and they get badges. You can reach, various levels, within the platform. And all of that ultimately, leads to the fact that, we have a community of followers at all, walks of life, right? So that itself is a story on its own. We don't need to go and, print full page ads on Wall Street Journal every time to say we are number one. But there are people who say that, hey, this is a great platform for CRM and so on and so forth, right? So I think the power of community is really something that cannot be, overstated. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think many people in the room, the largest percentage in this room, may not be gamers. When I say gamers, people who will spend 3 hours playing a game. In the last 3-4 years, there have been 5 or 6 games which have more than 400 million paid members. Now, how do you think they got these people in? Did they advertise in New York Times or they didn't do that? It's a community, right? The gaming community actually goes on social media and says, hey, this is great. Mind you, these games never actually advertised. The community was advertising for them. So again, coming back to a great game, a great one person's experience, and then encouraging that person to go on social media and put it. It has literally like the COVID R factor. It has an R factor which really is explosive. So you've got to ask yourself that, do you have a community into which you can actually plug your business into? And therefore you ask the question about online versus offline. We're saying, all this topic looks like it's all curated for the online space, but I think online is struggling more than offline. As we have seen in the last 6 months or 1 year, the online guys are all opening offline stores and struggling. It's not that easy running offline stores. So I think the jury is still out as far as that is concerned. So storytelling is extremely contextual, but to study, if anyone wants to do storytelling or get to be known, I think we should see what the gamers do.
Got it. And maybe, we have about 5-6 minutes. Just want to spend, the last segment to, we spent a lot of time discussing storytelling, emotional engagement, how do we connect with the audience. But at the end of the day, we do need to reflect that in our sales. It needs to come into the top line, right? So is there any signs, any sort of connection between the two to say, this much of brand engagement is the threshold for us to actually cross? Is there something of that sort? Anything across any category, anything that you've seen, observed, that'll be helpful to hear?
Yeah, I'll give you a real life example. This was one of those Diwali parties, and there were a lot of guys who were in marketing, digital marketing. So two of us friends got together and said, let's try and see what influencers do. So Ayushadha, I think many of you have seen Ayushadha. She's very smart as an influencer. So she had released one very recently, and then so we got 7 or 8 women in the room to see Ayushadha's latest release. So we got them individually to see it in a room. And then, they really loved it. They were laughing right through that. It was a 30-second, so it is about 1 minute thing. At the end of it, we said, come on now, tell us. So they were so thrilled, the way she was using that South Indian accent to pronounce these things, this, that. Then we asked her, what was the brand? They had no idea. Right? Now, Ayushadha is making a lot of money, that's for sure, as an influencer. But is it resulting in sales? I doubt it. I think you've got to be sales-centric. If the penny doesn't drop, your cash registers are not ringing, nothing matters. Eventually, we are in sales, unless you're, doing some charitable work. But even that requires a certain amount of return on investment. So the point I'm trying to make is that unless you focus your communication towards actually getting sale and getting footfall, I'm not sure anything matters.
I think the other angle of how much the bottom line is also getting impacted is also critical, because what's the use of the revenue if it's going to take away so much out of the bottom line?
Influencers will become millionaires, run around in cars, you'll be in the local Andheri train.
People out here trying to take that money away from all of us, we need to be mindful of this.
So what's a good runway for a story? If let's say, we are talking about the cash registers ringing, the bottom line not actually being thrown away.
I don't think you should worry about storytelling. You should worry about your business. You worry about the problem you're solving. Are you solving a problem, not solving a problem? The moment you solve the problem for somebody, he is your best advocate or she is your best advocate. Most people are a me too, me three, me four, me five. You're the seventh player in a very crowded market. You're not solving a specific problem. You're not cheaper. You're not better. You're not faster. Then what the hell's going on? Just having a big market size. I'm saying this because in grocery, $800 billion. How many people are succeeding in grocery? Very few. $800 billion. No, sorry, that's the total size. $400 billion is the total grocery size. How many players are there who are taking the whole Indian market? And it's true even of the US. $600 billion Walmart. Do they have 80% share? No, they have 42% share. So the issue is not the size of the market and stuff like that is not what's generating intent. The intent should be generated by what problem you're solving. Get to that first, everything else will follow.
A very good example, sir, is Decathlon. You would hardly see them spending money in marketing, but the rate at which they're growing in India is because they're solving most of the common problems of retailers in India. And one of them is seamless or frictionless shopping, right? So I think storytelling is important, but at the end, solving for the cash register to be ringing, I think solving the genuine problems of customers on the floor is very, very important. So, and in India, we are seeing that of late.
We should allow the audience to narrate some story.
Perfect. Any questions for the panelists? Sorry. Yeah, please. Can we get some mics or?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sriram. I run this brand called The Whole Truth. We're a 100% clean label food brand. And as a brand which depends on presence in physical retail, I have a question on, I can visualize very easily how to do storytelling, how to actually explain to people who you are. In an online setting, I can visualize doing it if I had my own store. How would one approach this as a problem in essentially someone else's store? Because each store has its own character, it's built with a particular vision in mind. And as brand who participates in these stores and gets presence there, how does one go about building your own story inside a physical space elsewhere?
So I think we kind of have this problem every time because we are truly omni-channel in that sense. Our own store is a lot more easy, as you said. But somebody else's store, you have a very limited space that you can work on. You don't have the same resources. And so from that perspective, there is a bit of leverage that you need to give or you should let go. But otherwise, your product and the way so for us, it's the front-end staff who actually espouses all the values that probably the brand carries and the product which carries it ahead. There is a limitation on that and there's nothing, you can't really go about doing anything beyond that.
But I agree. Product is the biggest storyteller. That itself is the biggest storyteller. How do your product make or create the best chava of the college or the best chavi of the college? And that's what matters and that is what is important. And that is, everything speaks product. बाकी सब कहानी है. Product जो है वही असली story जाके बोलता है.
I think most brands are present, most of the large brands are present in multi-formats as it was. You have your MBOs, you have your EBOs, etc. So in your EBOs, you have a much better way of actually communicating that because you can control the entire narrative. But that doesn't mean that you don't have a story to tell in the other formats that are there. And we've seen different modes, as it were. When you go to department stores, for example, we have our own staff that actually are communicating the story. But having said that, even as simple, and I remember this when we launched a new product at Fossil, we were launching automatic watches. And while automatic watches have been there for a long time, the fact is not everybody understands how an automatic watch, particularly younger audience that we are dealing with, not all of them understand that. So even as something as simple as just a sticker around the watch saying automatic, which calls out that particular feature, and a QR code next to that that tells you how it works, can actually take it forward. So is it as convenient as in a store where you have somebody demonstrating the product to you? No. But is it doable? It's doable. May not be as ideal, but it's doable. And I think this is the challenge that all of us face when we deal with brands in multiple formats. So it's not an insurmountable problem, but not as easy to handle.
I just answer just bit. As a grocery retailer, I can see and feel the pain in your voice, trying to get across to the category manager of a retail company. He thinks he's God's gift to mankind. So say sir. So it's the biggest problem. Every time I meet somebody outside, no, I can't get through to a category manager. Give me his phone number, this, that, whatever. So yeah. So I think finally when you get to him, I think when you want to launch a product in the offline, don't do extensive launches, do intensive launches. Take a part of the city where all the stores are. You need to spend money to take space in the store. You need to decorate up your space and sample out to the customer and take all the hoardings in that particular small area. Always in a cluttered market, you got to succeed inside out, not outside in. Because it's very extremely expensive to become outside in. It's better you do a very small area. You just take Andheri West. You become the king of Andheri West. You will get a lot of converters from Navi Mumbai.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Any one more question? Maybe after that we can wrap up. I saw a few hands there. Maybe all of it got answered with that one question. Okay, okay.
Hi, good evening to the panelists. My name is Binu Tangapan. I work with some of the districts at the district level with the district collector's office trying to help the self-help groups, SHGs, to try and, help them scale up. They are, if you look at the all India context, they do serious business, running into thousands of crores, but each one individual such small business, who could be an artisan, commands a very small piddly amount. Now, there are certain groups who work on behalf of them, get them together, and then, the business runs as we all know it. So what would be the story that should be created which will generate interest, excitement, so that their products sell, and in turn, the Bharat becomes India and grows? Because we know in the West, they value a lot for handicrafts. Whereas in India, that's just it's taking off. The awareness levels are very low. So I would like to know, how can we showcase their story so that their story becomes a big story? Thank you.
I think this is you've touched a raw nerve. If there's anything that we actually regret not doing in this country is promoting our artisans, whether it is making bread or making toys. They're really struggling. I think Khadi Gramodyog in the last 10 years has gone 20 times its sale that it ever has done. Why? Because somebody went and promoted it. I think the best way to promote artisan is through the government itself. But I think the artisans themselves have to make product of a certain quality. It is not as if all artisan products are good. They may be authentic, but may not be good enough. For instance, Pichwai painting from Puri, from Orissa. It's so beautiful and it's so painstaking. But a large painting, people go and haggle for 500 rupees as far as the painting is concerned. It's really a big challenge for the artisans in this country. You go to Kumbakonam toys. It's fascinating, that doll which shakes its head. It's called the Kumbakonam doll. It requires a certain amount of patronage. It requires a certain amount of visibility. And it is not only here, even in Africa, the artisans or the craftsmanship that exists in the village level Africa still suffers the same way. It's because of the money sits in the hands of the people who are not even exposed or have no disposition towards art and culture of that type. And therefore, I think it's a big gap. The solution is not in the horizon, I think, at least the way I see it.
No, whatever I have seen now and the way the world is turning up towards the authenticity and organic and the natural stuff, I think skill and the artisans are being given respect. And this is a new fad and new fashion out there in the Western world and the US, where individual countries, those basic handicraft is being promoted as a fashion. And that's the new fashion which is coming up. So I think this problem gets solved the moment we try and convert a story, create a story, wherein this becomes a part of the new trend and becomes a part of the new fashion. And that's how those artisans can be promoted, and those stories, smaller stories has to be created but has to get integrated with larger marketeers. And how do we do all of that? And that's the chain that we need to build. A lot of that has been done by this Modi government. A lot of that is also getting done with the ethnic wear promotion that is happening in apparel as well. If you look at the apparel segment, maybe 10 years back, ethnic wear was not too much in fashion. It was not considered as cool, but today it is being considered as cool due to certain brands picking it up, giving it a role model, making them to wear. So that is how the whole story gets built up, and that's how the whole community starts following it. And that is what the root is, and that is how I think it'll grow, and it is definitely bound to grow.
Yeah, I think there's good news there, because if you look at saris, for example, it's a good example of a very, very specific, at some time, village level skill that has been translated into a product that everybody is willing to pay premium price on. So it's not that we've not done it before, but every category is a challenge. And I think different organizations have taken up that challenge. It's not an easy challenge. You've got to build the whole category up. You have to build it up from its authentic roots onwards. And I know I just visited NMACC some time back, and it was wonderful to see, different parts of the country being represented for fabric creation. I mean, it's fascinating. But that's a story that's already been told. There are many more stories to be told. There is a value that can be attached to it. That value we have seen in some categories like saris, but that's a value that should be attached to other categories, and time will tell.
One store I would like to mention, recently in Hyderabad they opened the store called Swadesh. So that one store is dedicated to artisans of India. So you'll find carpets, you'll find art, you'll find sari, you'll find jewelry, you'll find from Jaipur, Banaras, Kanjivaram, Chennai, Bangalore, all remote areas, whatever everybody makes. So they have curated something. I'm not saying the top line or the business they are doing, but the concept of gathering all the artisans and the real essence of, like how you're mentioning, the respect of artisans have been kept in a very nice format with a very plush store. If you actually visit the store, it is one of the best stores in the country, I can say. Because it's one of the best streets already in a city in Hyderabad in Jubilee Hills. And they've opened nearly 25,000 square feet only of artisans. So that is one good way of paying respects. Second point, अभी मीडिया बहुत हो चुका है, lot of Instagram has come, तो क्या है, people are talking more about all of this. This has always been there. I'm a part of a legacy brand since 40 years. We've been doing ethnic wear, and more than 40 years we've been respecting the people who have been doing this job. But his point is very valid. हर कोई बनाता है, but जो सब बनाता है वो अच्छा या sellable होता है या नहीं होता है, that is one parameter to look into. So sustainability, a topic which has been the rage in the last 2 years, but nobody knows sustainable clothing will be so unaffordable. Even one kurti, what I can sell you in 5,000 or 500 or 2,000 or 3,000 will cost you 18,000. I can promote as a brand Neeru's, I can say I am starting a sustainable concept, but it's unaffordable. Then the same customer will come and say, sustainable मांगा था यार, इतना महंगा क्यों दे रहे हो? अरे आपको क्या पता है कि sustainability का backend क्या है? So it's easy to tell in a forum, talk about artisans, talk about sustainability, but it also has to make, I'm not saying make profits, but make money for somebody to sustain and sell it further again. कोई start करता है तो sustain भी तो करना है ना, खाली एक शौक के लिए तो नहीं करता है. So this is one angle which we have to look into.
Perfect. I think on that note, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for this engaging conversation. I'm sure the audience found it very useful and very enriching. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody.